Well, Regina, are you ready to have a discussion?
I am so ready to have a discussion, and I'm ready to welcome everyone to another session of Sutta and the City. Coming to you live from the greatest city on earth, New York City. So, welcome everyone. It's great to have you all back. It's good to see you again. As always, a pleasure. If there are any individuals here who are new tonight, we would like to encourage you to make sure that we have your email so that we can include you on all upcoming missives. So please make sure to do that. You can find us on our website, suitandthecity.com, and register your email there. Meanwhile, I believe that Stephen Sass is going to share his screen so he can give us some of that poetry mojo that he's got going on. So, Stephen, what have you got for us tonight?
Poetry time continues
Yay.
with the
It's
great
like
Canadian poet Jan Zwicky.
you are really, really, really into Miss Zwicky, I noticed.
It's kind of a Zwicky time, I think.
It is a Zwicky time. I must say, I am too. She's fabulous. So, she's got my vote.
And it's from the same collection of poetry that we read from last session, Wittgenstein Elegies. And you may know that one of the big themes that Wittgenstein, the philosopher, the real Mr. Wittgenstein, liked to talk about is how philosophical problems were sort of human made, that things were sort of as they should be, but people get all tangled up in their attempts to describe them. And it's sort of like in the knots of language is where we go wrong and create these conundrums, which we believe represent major problems. But in fact, perhaps it's all a problem of inability to articulate the problem itself. And so the limits of language. And so I think this poem has the idea that things are the way they are for maybe better or worse, and maybe we should attempt to just kind of see them for that way. So this is a piece, a small snippet. We walk into a room, our feet are bare. Books, papers, letters piled about, discarded tie and random pencils, picture crooked on the wall. At first we think, a mess. What disarray. It should be straightened out. But then we look around and recognize that no thing can be disturbed. Even the dust is in its place.
I wish I would have known about this poem when I was a kid and it was time to clean my room. I could have just presented that to my mom.
Even the dust has its place, is in
That,
its place, meaning don't mess with it.
that's right. That's right.
Well,
Um,
it is an unending struggle to fix things up. Things tend towards entropy.
well, I must say, um, dust is an issue here where I am on Riverside Drive, and it must be the traffic. But yeah, dust definitely has its place here. I know all about that.
Yeah.
Um, so I like what you said about language, and I don't know if I brought this up in our previous session. I was watching a lecture on YouTube about how our mind, how our brain is actually wired according to the language that we use. And I think that, the Buddha was just so, well, okay, he was enlightened. So obviously he was incredibly brilliant. You know, when he spoke about the importance of right speech and how everything begins in the mind, neuroscience wasn't a thing back then, but he knew and he was right because even the way we think and speak determines how we view ourselves in the world. And an example that I will give you, and please stop me if I'm being repetitive, is that I believe it was some linguist who was studying the Hopi. That's a tribe, a Native American, a tribe that's indigenous to here in North America. And in the Hopi language, there are no words for time, for designations of time. So, for example, tomorrow, today, yesterday, next year, in 5 minutes. There are no words for that concept. And so the Hopi, their sense of temporality, what it just didn't exist. So I can't tell you how different their life and their reality was from ours, but it was different. And when I get that information, I will clarify with you. But it is just an amazing thing, because people who are thinking, we hear of one track mind. So people who think, oh, everyone's bad, everyone's out to get me, everyone wants to hurt me. Their whole worldview is very, very different from someone who thinks most people are nice, most people are decent. And it's not just because they're thinking, but their mind is wired that way.
Yep, I would agree. I mean, I think in one of the lines in Wittgenstein's earlier book, the Tractatus, is something like, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." And he fought against this concept of a private language where we could sort of construct ideas privately without the use of language as a communal thing. So to be was to really be in the world. It's a complicated idea, but I think it's certainly true that the way our language works is a very strong determiner in the way we conceptualize things. And thinking and pondering is a big concept in Buddhist thought too. He talked about it a lot. Vitaka and vichara, right? It's a big thing, how our mind is currently functioning. And as of course you said so well, right speech, which I think our sutta tonight is all about, and how we engage in discussion with others is a huge determiner about the way we are, the way we exist in the world. It's not just about others, it's about our well-being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a really important focus when we look at tonight's sutta. Us looking within. Remember, Buddhism requires us to turn eyeballs that are always facing the world and other people and situations and put them inward. So, with this reminder, because I know everyone knows that, with this reminder, we're going to re examine the sutta that we already started exploring together Sunday. And for those of you who weren't here, let's just go over a brief review of the part we did read. We read the prose, and of this we're lucky because I love the sutta. It has poetic stanzas. But in this part that we read Sunday, the whole point was topics of discussion and what we choose to discuss and who we choose to have these discussions with. And I bet you everyone in here has had discussions with people that maybe they shouldn't have. And it's not pleasant. But the Buddha is here to the rescue. And he has told us who those people are who are competent to have a discussion. And I'm going to break it down for you.
This is where the Buddha says, talk to the hand.
That's right. Talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to the hand. That's what he said. So people who are competent, now we'll start with the people who are not competent to have a discussion. So if they're asked a question and it's supposed to give you, you're supposed to have a general answer, but they don't answer it generally. If they're supposed to provide an analysis, but they're not analyzing anything. If they're supposed to have a counter question, but they don't have a counter question. And if they're supposed to set something aside and they don't, they keep bringing it up and bringing it up and bringing it up, they're not competent to have a discussion. On the other hand, if they do provide the generalization, if they do analyze, if they provide the counter question and they set certain things aside, they're competent. And I want to do a sneaky trick. I'm going to do a sneaky trick. That person who is not competent or competent can even sometimes be us. It can be us. And this is what I want to ask ourselves. When are we not competent? Because it's incredibly important. The Buddha gives us some other examples. And I will encourage you, if you haven't read this, to go over all of these examples. We don't have to go over them all now, but essentially what he's saying is, you know, if they're asking you a specific issue and they're dodging the issue, if they're providing distractions, irrelevant points, this person, you don't need to have the conversation. And this one I love. This one I love right here because I see this all the time, and I'm going to plead guilty. I'm not going to plead the fifth. I plead guilty, Your Honor. Crushing, mocking, trivial mistakes. I love trivial mistakes. Okay, you use that word out of context. I love that. The comma is in the wrong place. You fail. You see, the Buddha is not okay with this. This is not seizing on trivial mistakes. And I know I've said this a lot because these words right here are huge in our social media world. Crushing. Oh, you crushed it. I had to help moderate a discussion a couple of nights ago, and after the discussion, one of the persons in my organization said, "Oh, Regina, you crushed it." And I cringed. I know that she meant that in a positive way, but the language we use is just so critical. I don't want to crush anything, you know? So I think that y'all get the point. And unless, Stephen, you had something else to bring up, I think we can go to the poetic stanzas. Stephen,
Let's read the poetry.
Let's do it. So let's see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. So let's have a couple people read who haven't read yet. Ken has his hand up. Ken, if you could read a few stanzas. Let's say 2 each. Ken and then Gita. Go ahead, Ken.
Those who converse with hostility, too sure of themselves, arrogant, ignoble, attacking virtues, they look for flaws in each other. They rejoice together when their opponent speaks poorly and makes a mistake, becoming confused and defeated. But the noble ones don't discuss like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Gita?
Thank you for the opportunity. If an astute person wants to hold a discussion connected with the teaching and its meaning, the kind of discussion that noble ones hold, then that wise one should start the discussion, knowing when the time is right, neither hostile nor arrogant, not even excited, contemptuous or aggressive. Or with a mind full of jealousy, they'd speak from what they rightly know. They agree with what was well spoken without criticizing what was poorly said.
Thank you, Gita.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will call on Ayavimala.
Make sure I'm okay. They not persist in finding faults, nor seize on trivial mistakes, neither intimidating nor crushing the other, nor would they speak with sly implications. Good people consult for the sake of knowledge and clarity. That's how the noble ones consult. This is a noble consultation. Knowing this, an intelligent person could consult without arrogance.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who read and everyone who volunteered. So let's look at these. shall we? I know they make perfect sense and it's not too confusing. Stephen, did you have anything you wanted to say before I?
No, I mean, it seems quite clear how the noble ones should converse, which would seem to kind of cut down on a lot of our conversation time, right? Because I think, at least for me, it seems like a lot of conversation I have is kind of sort of without that much purpose. You know, just kind of chatting, enjoying conversation with another person. And I guess one has to wonder if that is sort of okay. Maybe that's okay. I don't know. What do you think about just kind of fun chatting?
Well, I mean, the Buddha spoke to us about the dangers of idle chatter, and it's a tough one. But I think, you know, when we don't engage in idle chatter, we're likely to engage or more likely to engage in right speech. Um, but conversing with hostility, too sure of oneself, arrogant, looking for flaws in each other. Well, I can tell you that this is an easy thing to happen. I have a few friends, one in particular that I seem to bring up all the time. We do like to debate, you know, and I know that the Buddha was a debater, and there's even specific traditions, Buddhist traditions, where debate is very important. But the important thing is not to have the hostility, not to have the I'm right, you're wrong, therefore you're bad, and I'm good. And the reason that I think it's important to zero in on this particular stanza right here is when we can't have a conversation and listen to others and hear others, then we have a breakdown not only in personal relationships, but also in societies. And I think that this is something that we're seeing across the world now. And I also want to point out that one thing that is discussed a little bit further up here is the importance of lending an ear. If they lend an ear, they have what's required. If they lend an ear, that means we must also lend an ear. And I'm reminded of a few sessions back when we spoke about the importance of patience. And I remember it was Ayurvimala who brought up, well, is patience the opposite of anger? And in a sense it is, because when we have that patience, we can lend an ear. We can tune in to what's going on. So it's not just speaking, but listening.
That's a great point, Regina. And I'm reminded briefly of a very important other sutta called the Four Great References, which tells us how to confirm that certain teachers are in accordance with the Dhamma. And one of the instructions we get in that sutta is to listen carefully to what the statement in question is, and neither condemn nor accept, but consider very carefully what's being said. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because I think a lot of times we tend to sort of reactively push things away without fully having the patience to consider the viewpoint. But here, it's said over and over again there, and I think it's echoed here, that it's important to listen carefully to what others say and not immediately agree nor disagree. And it can be very hard to do.
It can be very hard to do, yes. And I think also, you know, it's in listening and hearing what others say, we can learn on several levels what they may be speaking about. Someone may speak and put forth a position in which we are in opposition. But if we truly set aside our prejudicial view or our favorite view, we may see that they are coming to their position from maybe an attitude of fear, an attitude of concern. They really, really care. And that's why they're coming. Whether what they care about is right or wrong is beside the point. But the fact is they have a concern, and that is promoting their position. Or maybe they have a great love of something. We may not agree that certain trees should be saved, but maybe they have a great love of a certain tree. And therefore, their position of completely never, never, never should trees be cut down is coming from a place of love. And when we see it from that perspective, it's hard to go to battle with someone. It's hard to rejoice when someone speaks poorly and makes a mistake, when we truly see the root of their position. And by the way, I'm not for chopping down trees. I just want to make that clear. And here we have this here. If an astute person wants to hold a discussion connected with the teaching and its meaning. So what is being spoken about here, Stephen?
Well, it seems like it would be about the Dhamma, because I would say perhaps this poetry is addressed first of all to monastics. And we can say that perhaps monastics are held to a higher standard, or perhaps we can say they aspire to a higher standard than us lay people in our sloppy ways normally operate. And so, in other words, we might say that people who are monastics would primarily be talking about the Dhamma and not just kind of hanging out and chatting. So I think that's what this stanza is talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry about the sirens. So I think also what's important, knowing when the time is right. I think we talked about this in the previous session and the session before that. Waiting to speak about something for when it's the right time. And then when it's the right time, not speaking from a place of hostility or arrogance or excitement.
Or aggression.
Right.
Which is, that kind of thrill of domination. It really tends to enter into a lot of discussions, perhaps more so for men than women. But this idea of like combative discussion, getting points, zingers, ticking boxes, is a sort of exciting thing. But one has to question, or at least think about how wholesome it is, how beneficial it is to one's own mind.
And it can be very subtle. The other night, I have a new roommate. And so the other night we had our first little getting to know you thing. It just happened, and she would talk. And then I found myself not necessarily lending an ear, but like forming what I was going to say. Oh, it's like, oh, she's an actor and she's talking about that actor. And I know this person. So let me make this point about that actor that I know, and oh, in this film that I saw that person in. So, even if it doesn't seem aggressive, it is sort of like, I want to rack up some points here. Look at how much I know about that.
Yeah. I have a friend who told me that he thinks because he was getting his doctorate degree in philosophy, Western philosophy, that he was sort of trained to, as he was hearing someone speak, to be already forming the rebuttal as he was listening. And it was not even so much about disagreement, but just forming the rebuttal, that the kind of normal operating procedure was to push back, to argue, to debate, that it was not okay to just say, well, that's interesting, I'll think about it. But reforming the rebuttal as sort of multitasking as one is listening to someone else speak is a thing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Um, and so, yes, finding faults, trivial mistakes. I love the sly implication. Oh my gosh, people have not changed in thousands of years. They made sly implications. So there is a lot here. And I think the right way to look at this, well, there's many right ways, but the important and I think the most helpful way is to see when we do this and not necessarily when others do it to us. And
Yes.
and I'm wondering if other people have questions, concerns, maybe they don't think they ever do any of these things. Um,
You know, the Buddha even talked about eel wriggling. Have you ever heard about that?
no.
Eel wriggling like an eel. The idea that somebody is a skilled arguer, interlocutor, and their skill lies in the ability to sort of twist out of positions and never be caught, never be pinned down to a specific thing, always find some way out, sort of like maybe like a lawyer. And so he called this eel wriggling, somebody who could always find a turn of phrase to pivot the argument to never be uh, actually caught.
Well, what's interesting about the eel, say that 5 times fast. What's interesting about the eel wriggler, I think when someone's really, really good at getting out of this and finding escape routes, the danger in this is that they can actually convince themselves. And then whereas truth becomes something malleable, right? And in that case, we can convince ourselves of anything. So
Yes, it comes down to who just makes the more skillful argument, the better turn of phrase.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Alternative reality.
Right, which we all seem to be living in. And there's a lot of danger in that, a lot of danger. And we have to go against the stream. That's what our practice tells us. Are there,
I wanted to say, as people hopefully can raise their hand to chime in, I also was thinking about when reading the sutta about how it might be applicable to monastics living mostly in seclusion versus lay people who live mostly, except maybe in the time of COVID, out into the world where we are just sort of forced to interact much more with people, and to what extent the teaching is, to what extent we can take this on, and to what extent it sort of becomes very difficult as a lay person out in the world.
well, I'm going to challenge you on that, Stephen, because, well, I have not lived long term in a monastery. I did stay in a monastery, and the monastery was the Thai forest tradition. And so we were always around people. Um, and and the onus is upon us to adhere to these ways of being. But since you brought up monastics, well, I hate to put Ayavimala on the spot, but Ayavimala, do you find this different for you, or is it the same for you as it is for every one of us?
Well, I don't live in a monastery, and so I have I'm more out in the world all the time, and I think as a monastic, I always try to be careful about what I am saying if I'm in public. I mean, I have some friends, including monastic friends, but some lay friends that, they probably see more of just my regular self than a lot of people do, um, where I'm liable to say anything. But I'm always aware. So if I'm uh, even just talking to people, well, it's always if it's doing a Dhamma talk or doing something with the Dhamma, but I'm just always more careful about it. And COVID has been great for me because I've been able to be more away from people. It's been, I felt more like a monastic, not having to interact all the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Maybe
Definitely.
COVID has kind of made us all a little bit closer to monastic style living. And I wonder if it's helped us practice our right speech a bit better, because so many of us are spending a lot more time alone than we might have had previously. Of course, then one can have the question, is the thoughts in our own mind and sort of conversations that we sort of can have imaginarily with other people that you can't escape, even if you lock yourself in a room, you could still, one has to wonder, in other words, if this advice applies to engaging in certain thoughts, having imaginary debates. I can type out reams of paper containing imaginary debates I've had with people I know that never really happened. It's just junk. And to engage in that is probably not a good idea either.
No, I agree. And even though we are, all kind of doing our social distancing and not around a lot of people, I will say that I do have those debates myself, seizing on trivial mistakes. And, here in the States, when there was a senator from, all right, Texas, who tried to go to Mexico for some fun in the sun during this ice storm, and everyone was upset with him, I kind of had fun with that. I did seize, and it wasn't a trivial mistake, but I did seize on it. And I'll admit to it, and I was aware in myself, it's like, is where you're going. This is that way danger lies, that way danger lies. I think the importance is not to condemn ourselves, but to be like, doing it again. The mind is taking that up, you know. I wonder if anyone else has noticed this type of situation going on.
I wonder if everyone's in hyper right speech mode right now, because we're having very little input from people. Everyone's very guarded about their speaking. And maybe that's okay. Sometimes it's better to remain quiet too.
Does anyone have any thoughts or questions? Yes, Catherine.
Yeah, thoughts. I feel that talking to lay people, uh, even lay people also, talking to normal people who are non-Buddhist and talking to Buddhists is very different. And of course, talking to Kalyana Mitras, we are always very mindful. When we talk, we don't actually wander from one topic to another. And we don't fuss over a friend's mistakes. We are very polite. We do not put the questioner down in a way, in this sense. In a very courteous way also. But when we talk to non-Buddhists or just normal friends, probably we are not so mindful. We just follow them. That's what I think. So then we will react differently.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Catherine, I absolutely agree. Guilty is charged again. I think this is also why the Buddha said, noble friendships are all of the holy path.
And also that our way of interacting with people, different people, is highly conditioned. And so if we're used to interacting with a certain person in one way, maybe from years and years ago, it can be actually hard to change that pattern, change that habit into maybe a better habit, because we're just kind of going to slide back into an old habit.
Right. But I have found that when I keep myself accountable, it's easier for me to say, okay, you're keeping yourself accountable. Don't go there. So we have some hands raised. We have Suan, and then we have Gita. Okay.
Hi, Regina. I actually had my hand up to read before.
Oh, okay.
You can go with somebody that might have a more pressing question right now. I'm kind of just listening.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sue-Ann. Sorry I didn't see your hand earlier. Geeta?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to share some thoughts on speech, the right speech. I found that personally it was a practice that takes number of years. Because I think when I was younger, I never thought about what was coming out of my mouth. It was more habitual, lashing back or talking back or rude speech or harsh speech or divisive speech. I think through the years after I started learning the Dharma, I started guarding my tongue. And then, more importantly, in the more recent years, I realized that it's coming from my thoughts. So that I have to actually concentrate and be more guarded on my thoughts and not to allow any of the wrongful speech divisions or the five sections not to enter into my thoughts and to have more of a compassionate point of view when conversing with someone else. And a lot of the time I find that just being quiet is a very peaceful state all around, because you just stay neutral, and I engage only when it's absolutely necessary to get engaged, because a lot of the times it leads you down a rabbit hole, and that's something that you don't want to get into or get entangled with. So I think it's practice and getting rid of the habit energy, and then cultivating the wholesome states of mind and thought and speech, guarding your speech. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta. Yeah, for me, for those of you out there who may have difficulties in terms of not getting into argumentation because it is so seductive in a way, it proves how smart we are. It proves we've done our research. We're great orators when we're good argumenters. And then sometimes we just get darn angry and want to put it out there. That's not right. What you're saying is not right, and you shouldn't even think that way. And I'm going to tell you why. And the important thing is like to ask ourselves before we go there, will this be to my benefit? Will it be to the others? Will it be for both? And if not, to try and exercise a self-control, because I know for me, inevitably, it's a situation where it's like, I shouldn't have said that. And now there's this argument. And now this friend, I'm walking out of her door. I'm going home. This is unpleasant. Meanwhile, I started the whole situation. So it's really important to, it's like in Bhikkhu Bodhi's, his little book, The Noble Eightfold Path. When self-control is out of the question, we must crush mind with mind. We must do that.
Yeah, that's a good reference. And also I was thinking how there are several references or mentions to the mind as sort of like a wild animal, that it has to be tamed, that it has to be trained, unruly, something that has to be domesticated. We see this in Anguttara Nikaya Book of Ones, but we see it across the whole canon. This idea that the mind in its sort of natural free-range state is kind of crazy, and it just goes wherever it wants, here and there, lands down, touches down, picks back up. We're not really in charge. And so we have to actively train it, condition it, work on it through mindfulness. And that's the point of these precepts, of course, that we can recall this rule. Be mindful. Don't throw things at your cats. Things like that. So anyway, it's a very big project. And I would say that at the heart of it all is mindfulness. Because if you don't remember the project, if you don't remember the plan, if you don't remember the precepts at that very moment when they are crucial, because you're just sort of in the passion moment, then you're not mindful. And then you condition a very unfortunate future, as you sort of alluded to. So the more we can even just say, well, if I'm not sure, I'm keeping my mouth shut,
Mhm.
right? I just don't even have an opinion.
Brahman, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I really can relate to what both of you are saying in terms of sometimes feeling overwhelmed and the need to express. And then also what Stephen said about having this running battle argumentatively. I've definitely done that. And what first comes to mind is what Tarania often says is remember that we're ordinary human beings. So as much as we'd like to ascribe to the Buddhist teachings, we can really back ourselves into a corner. It can be non-productive. And then lastly, there's one sutta that I love that talks about this whole area, which is, I think, in the Majjhima Nikaya, called Madhupindika, Honeyball.
Mm.
The nature of disputation, and it's just priceless. Dandapani. Dandapani means man with stick or man leaning on stick, i.e. someone wanting to make pick a fight. So just some thoughts, but thank you both.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Brahman. Thank you so much. I love it. Dantapani. What is your Dharma? And
Stick in hand, ready for battle.
I love it. And the Buddha says, you know, my Dharma is non-contention. Non-contention. And I think that's a beautiful teaching.
He also said, I don't argue with the world. The world argues with me.
Right. It's a hard thing to do, not to argue with this world.
The
But-
world is as we found it, as Wittgenstein said.
It
We have
is
to
indeed.
think about the world as we found it.
That is correct. Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, everyone. Seeing things as they really are and not getting angry. Meanwhile, we will pick this up again and Sunday, and a snapshot for our next sutta. It's going to be a very exciting one where the Buddha has a discourse with his son Rahula, and it's quite a nice one. So something to look forward to. So
Okay. Well, good luck with the world as you find it, Regina.
good luck with you too. And I want everyone here to, I'm changing my view so I can see you all. View gallery. I want to thank all of you for showing up tonight, for sharing, for lending an ear, because as we saw in the sutta, that's very important to lend an ear. And thank you all for sharing the Dharma. It's been wonderful. And have a wonderful evening and day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regina.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Thank you, Regina.
Stephen. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Be
Have a good
safe.
night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Be safe.